Survivors, seekers, and thrivers, welcome to Transcending Trauma, a spiritual odyssey. I'm Shari Lee Roberts, living proof that transformation is real. Get ready for powerful insights, inspiring stories, and a little laughter along the way.
Hello, we are here with the amazing Karen Hall. I asked Karen if her intuition shined early in her life, and she emphatically said, yes. Tell us how old you were and how it came through.
Yes. Well, the earliest memory that I have is when I was about 3 years old, and I had fallen down, and I skinned my knee, and I was bleeding, and I thought that I needed to drink the blood. And my mother said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "It's the blood of Jesus." And my mom's like, "Where in the world did you get the idea that you're connected to the blood of Jesus?" But anybody that talked about God, I remember I was so drawn to them because my dad was an atheist. My mom was an agnostic. We didn't talk about God, nothing about religion. We didn't say prayers. We didn't read scriptures. We didn't do any of that.
During your severe event talk, you mentioned your parents being atheist and agnostic. I know, and I think most people know, an atheist does not believe in a higher being. I had to look up agnostic. So why don't you tell everyone what agnostic is?
Right. So an agnostic doesn't know if there's a God. And so the atheist is sure there is not a God or a higher power. The agnostic isn't sure, but they don't have a feeling that yes, there is one, or no, there isn't. They just don't know. And so they're kind of confused about the whole thing. So it was an interesting environment to grow up in, and to have this connection to spirituality. I just was so drawn to anything spiritual. And I said prayers. And I don't know how I learned to say prayers, but I would say prayers. And I remember, because you were asking me what were some of my memories of being my intuition and things. And I remember I would say prayers when I would lose things. And then I would get the answer of where it was. And so I would go to that place. Like sometimes it was a pocket in my coat that I hadn't worn for, months or whatever. Sometimes it was in a little hidden spot somewhere. Anyway, I would always get the answer, and I would run to my mother. I would be so excited that I acted on my intuition and that I got the answer. And I would say, "Mom, guess what? The Lord told me, blah, blah, blah." And she would say, "That's a coincidence." And I'd say, "No, it's not." And she'd say, "Yes, it is." And I said, "No, it's not." Well, this was another thing that was very unusual. I was shy in some ways. Because of my trauma, I was more of a people pleaser. I did not assert myself in a lot of ways. There were some ways that I did, but this is one of the ways that I asserted myself, to have the confidence to say, yes, it was an answer from God, and you're wrong. This was not a coincidence. Well, this baffled my mom and dad, absolutely baffled them, because this very compliant child is now basically non-compliant. I would tell them about, spiritual things. I had dreams that would have meaning. I had people come to me and tell me before they were going to die, and it prepared me. My grandpa came to me and let me know, and that was so comforting. And when he passed away, everybody was so upset, and I was so calm. I felt him right with me.
How were you when he passed?
I was around the age of 10 when he passed away. and I just adored him. And so it was so sweet that I felt comforted by him. And I felt so sad for my mom and my grandma. They were so upset. And I tried to comfort them and tell them where he was. And they said to me, "You must be in denial." I'm not in denial. I know he's gone. I know he's in a better place. Baffled them by my reactions because I felt so much peace because I felt him with me and I felt his love for me. And it wasn't over. He had just changed, dimensions, but he was still right here. And I don't remember the first person that I felt from the other side because I have felt people from the other side for a long time. But I remember that one specifically because it was so dramatic in contrast to other people's reactions at that event.
Yeah, totally. Really, how do you know what they're telling you is a feeling? Do you see them? Do you hear them?
Yeah, so all of the above. When I was a child, I would see them in my mind's eye and I would feel them and I would sense them. And sometimes there was confirming things that would happen so that I knew. And it was really interesting because I was being told that wasn't a possibility and
Yeah.
that wasn't even happening. Some of the witnesses were so strong. And then I started hearing words, specific words. And sometimes they would be said in like old English. Like I remember one time somebody said something to me, the voice said in my ear, "What she speaks is not true," or something to that effect. It wasn't the way that I would say it at all. Sometimes it was loud. Sometimes they would say my name. They would say Karen. And then I would know, oh, because I don't normally talk to myself like that. Even when I didn't have that communication that way, I was communicating. When you were asking me what did I do as a child, I remember because I felt very alone with that. I felt like nobody really understood that part of me that was so vital because it comforted me. I had a lot of fears and anxiety. I was born 2.5 months premature.
Yeah.
And I was all alone during that 2.5 months in an incubator. And I weighed 1 pound, 13 ounces shortly after birth. So they anticipated that I wouldn't survive. I was less than the size of a grapefruit. And I did. And they said, well, she's a fighter, but she's going to be retarded. She's going to be a vegetable. That's what they said. They said I would be a vegetable, I'd be blind, and I'd be a vegetable. But I wasn't. And here I am by the grace of God. And, I've thought a lot about my spirituality. And I've thought how I was so sure that no one could dissuade me. I mean, I was forbidden to go to church. I was forbidden to read scriptures. I was forbidden to talk to anybody that related to that. I was forbidden to talk out loud about it at a certain period of time. And at one point, as I mentioned in my speak talk, my family said they were going to kick me out because of my beliefs.
Yeah.
And yet I never denied. I was so sure, which is absolutely contrary, like I said, to this child. I felt that. And that was what gave me courage, was knowing that they were with me. And I realized at one point, because I've thought a lot about those years those months in the incubator, a baby all alone with no mother to hold her and nurture her and feed her. I mean, babies die from not being touched.
Yeah.
And how did I survive all that time, on my own? It must have been terrifying to be all alone, and the world must have felt like such a dangerous place, and not being able to process anything because that was nonverbal trauma. And I realized I don't think I was alone in that incubator. I think God held me in his arms. And I think angels were all around me and comfort me. And I think that's why I had this predisposition, so to speak, that I was so sure that they were there. I think my spirit knew that they were there and helped my little body to grow and thrive and survive. And so it has been a vital, of all paramount importance to me. And it didn't matter if somebody said it didn't happen or it didn't exist. I knew it did.
Well, they are takes a deep belief, power, confidence to stand in that proclaimment and fend off all naysayers. Now, if you don't mind, will you share the other traumas that you've endured?
I have faced a lot of trauma. The deepest trauma that I face every time is being alone and being abandoned. And I have had very close people to me that have abandoned me at very critical times when I was extremely vulnerable. Like when I've had a baby, I had postpartum depression. And during one of my pregnancies, my first pregnancy, my family was having issues, and I felt very strongly that I needed to support a family member. My other family members, my mother in particular, felt that I needed to do something different. And I disagreed, which was very unusual, and it was very frustrating for my mother because she had a vision in her mind that this would help the other family member. I had a vision in my mind that she was 1,000% wrong and that I needed to do something else. And so she stopped talking to me during my entire pregnancy. She did not communicate with me in any form. And we didn't have email back then, but we had letters. So I wrote her a letter every week. She never wrote back. And it was such a lonely time for me because, you want your mother when you're pregnant and trying to figure all this out. And then I had my baby, and my husband was getting ready to graduate from school. And I had my very best friend lived in the area. She brought me a dinner, and she's the only person that helped take care of me when I had my baby. Almost everyone that I knew, their mother came and helped them, and my mother did not. So a week after I had the baby, she sent me a message and said that my grandma would come out. Well, a week later, I was on my feet and I was, doing fine. But I was very grateful. My grandma came out. We sewed a little quilt for my baby. That was very special to have. And then my husband graduated from college the next week. And so my mother came out for the graduation and to see the baby, and we started talking again. But that was very traumatic for me. And then in contrast, when my sister had a baby, my mother went to all the prenatal classes. It doted on her. And there was this contrast that continued throughout my life ever since I've been a child. And there were numerous times that different family members have just cut me off for years at a time. One family member cut me off for 8 years, no communication. Who did I rely on? I relied on God. I relied on the people that I knew loved me from the other side. And so I was going to tell you another thing. When I was a little girl, because I felt so lonely, I was saying my prayers and I was trying to think who else loved me over there, over there on the other side. I didn't know the word veil, but on the other side of the veil, I was like, and I knew there was somebody, but I didn't know her name. And so I said, I'm going to call you Delilah. So I would go to the mirror and I would talk to Delilah, and I would say, Delilah, I feel so sad about whatever. And then I would talk to myself, and I would say, I love you, Karen. And I would tell myself all the things that I wished that someone would say to me. And this was so incredible that as a child, I am doing mirror work. And as a child, I am doing affirmations, and positive self-talk. I mean, it's just miraculous that I even knew that existed, because I had other negative self-talk that was going on. I felt all these fears. I had this rejection that I was dealing with. And I didn't have a lot of confidence in other ways. I would not speak out loud in class, hardly ever. I mean, if you called on me to stand up and do a report, terrifying for me. And I had all kinds of fears, but in that area, I had all the confidence in the world because I knew
what was the conversation that occurred that prompted people to just stonewall you.
I remember that there was a meeting everybody got together and they said, they presented what they thought. I presented what I thought. They could not control me. I would not back down. I said, this is why this needs to be this way. In their mind, it was like life or death. It was so critical. And they could not understand why I could not see their point of view.
Can you tell us what the event was?
So my sister had eloped with the fellow, and she'd been dating him. My parents had very bad feelings about him. They had done research, they found out he'd been married before, contacted the ex-wives, who all said that he was very abusive. I mean, very abusive.
Oh my God.
So my parents were very worried about my sister, and she had made some comments about some things about him that confirmed their fears. So they were trying to help her get out of this marriage, and he was so controlling about how much he talked to us and things like that. So she was talking to me more because I had not said anything about how he was abusive. I was allowing her to come to this conclusion, like very gently. For example, she and her husband came to visit me and my husband, and she noticed the contrast. And she said to me, does your husband ever say that you're a zero? And I said, no. And she said, oh, because my husband says that to me all the time. And so I would ask her, well, how do you feel when he says that? I didn't say, he should never say that to you.
Yeah.
I knew she wasn't ready to hear that.
Yeah.
And then she would point out different things that I would do and how my husband would react, what was happening in her life. Well, she was doing some of that with my mom and dad, and my mom and dad, in their good intended hearts, would be alarmed. And they would say, they thought, if I open her eyes to this, she'll recognize, they would say, that's abuse. And so then she felt fear about telling them certain things, but she would continue to confide in me. So my parents got to the point where things were so bad, they felt that she was in danger for her life. And so they said, what we need to do is we need to stop talking to her so that she misses the family and she will come back.
No.
And I said, no. I said, you can do that if you feel the need to do that. But I will be the lifeline. I will be the one that she knows that she can still talk to. And if you feel that that's what you need to do, I'm not going to stop you, but I need to be there for her. I need to be this voice, because if you do that, I believe that she will feel shame, and I believe that she will feel unloved, and she will not talk to you. And I believe she will be drawn closer to him because she has nowhere to come to.
Yes.
And I also felt very strongly, I said, if she feels she has nowhere to come to, and it gets to that point that she leaves, I think that if she were to come home, she will have this thought. If I come home, she will hear, I told you so. And there will be so much shame involved that she may not come home. I will be the safe place. I will continue to talk to her. Well, this caused my parents major trauma. They were so triggered by this event, by my feelings, and they started escalating in their emotions in the meeting. And they said, no, you need to do this. You need to cut her off. Your brother was there. I think my grandma was there, my whole family. And they started raising their voices. They started standing up. They started getting bigger, in front of me. Brother was yelling at me, and my father was all upset, and everybody was yelling at me. And I was just so calm. And I said, no, I will not cut her off. Now, remember, they had threatened to cut me off. This is why my mother did not talk to me my whole pregnancy, was because I refused to do what she asked me to do. And she said, fine, if you're not going to be aligned with the family and what we feel is the best thing to do, then we will cut you off too. So that's how that happened. That's why my mother didn't talk to me. So I continued to talk to my sister. We continued to visit. What eventually happened was my sister told me about how severe the abuse was, and she was able to get away, and she line. I told her to get a go bag. I told her to have a safe place that she'd go. We lived in different states, so she wasn't like she could just come over to my house. And I told her, call me as soon as you're safe. And so we just kept in contact about the whole thing. She got away. She got to a friend's house. He didn't know where she was, but he was trying to find out. It was absolutely terrifying for her. Money was an issue. It was just everything. And so I told my parents she would like to come home, but she's very afraid that you're going to say, I told you so. She did go home, and she told me the only way that she was able to go home was because to me, that I had acted as that lifeline for her, first to see the contrast and to come to that conclusion on her own and to have that support to be able to leave. She did go home, but I was a casualty of war, and my parents were very unhappy with me. We reconciled after I had the baby. My sister got out of the marriage. They were so grateful to have her back home. They worked really hard not to say, I told you so, because I said that will alienate her and that will cause more shame and it will damage your relationship. So they did listen, and we reconciled, and only did that out of love. They felt like that was the right thing to do, and they felt like they were being protective. It was not with an ill intent. Thank heavens I understood that. My sister didn't talk about religious things. My mom and her could talk about all kinds of things, but when I would talk about things, spiritual things always came up, because I was always and that day when we had that family meeting and I disagreed, they kicked me out and they said, you're not welcome in our home. And my husband and I left, and we had nowhere to go. And we lived in a different state. We didn't have money. We didn't have a hotel. We were so broke, and we were like, oh my gosh, where are we going to stay? We had enough gas money to get home, but we didn't have money for a hotel, and we didn't have anything to eat. And we were so hungry. And I remember we drove to another town, and it was late at night. We couldn't even find a restaurant that was open. And we stayed at this seedy, the cheapest motel we could find. And we were afraid to get in the bed. It was like bed bugs. I mean, we were in our town. and so, just things like that threatened my sense of safety, my sense of security. I mean, to not have my family there when I felt so vulnerable being pregnant.
What came up you two in that city hotel, and what are the miracles that came of you standing in your truth?
Yes, I did have many miracles. One of the sweetest miracles during my pregnancy is my daughter came to me many times during my pregnancy, and we did 3 sonograms, because I kept telling everybody what her name was, and I kept telling everybody what she looked like, and because I could see her, she had little blonde ringlets, and I could see her in my mind's eye. I saw her as an adult with the other children, and I saw her with me and her arms around these other children that were coming. Anyway, she would tell me things, and I faced a lot of opposition at my job. There were many, many things that were very difficult for me, but she would come and be with me, and she would let me know, I'm here with you. It's okay. And she would put her arm around me, and I felt this incredible strength. And I have told her ever since she's been little that she's my redwood, and our roots are intertwined. And there have been times when I've been on really stressful calls, and as a child, she would come up and put her arm around me, and I would remember how she did that as a spirit before she was born. I felt so much strength from her. I felt strength from my other children. They came to me. I told my husband all their names and who they were. And he was like, you know this.
Yeah.
We kept going to get a sonogram. I bought all these little pink dresses for her, and we were so poor. And my husband said, what if it's a boy? What are we going to do? All we have is a pink dress.
Yeah.
I got at a garage sale, Anyway, I said, it's Stephanie. I said, you don't have to worry. It's Stephanie. And the doctor was like, I don't know what it is about the baby. It's the most modest baby I have ever seen. And we can't find out if it's a boy or a girl. And I said, don't worry. I know it's a girl. So that was one of the sweetest miracles. Have her be so clear in her communication so strong that I didn't feel alone. Even at work, she'd go to work with me. She would warn me of things and she would tell me things so that I knew what to expect. All my children have done things like that with me before they were born. I mean, I could go on and on telling you about different things and different ways they have, supported me and helped me. And my children are my greatest joy. And before I got married, when I was a little girl, I felt like I was going to die before I graduated from high school. I was sure that I was going to die. I wrote it in my journal. I just didn't think I was going to live. And I think it was because heaven was so close and I had a lot of dreams about my life and about things that I needed to do. I felt this urgency. I always felt this urgency. I was like always racing to catch up. And I think that's partly as a preemie, you feel like you're always trying to catch up with everybody else. But I did. I thought that I was going to die and I thought I would never be a mother. And I wanted to be a mother so much, but I thought, well, I won't be able to be a mother because I'll die before I'm old enough to be a mother. I'll die before I thought I'd never get married. And so when I graduated from high school, I was like, I'm still alive. Oh my gosh. But then I thought, well, I'll die before I get married. And then I got married. And high school and getting married, I had a profound, powerful experience where I was told that I had these special, noble spirit children and that they were going to bring me so much joy.
You were told what?
The Lord told me that I was going to have special, noble spirit children and that they were helping me. Being so scared to do things, I was like, I have these powerful souls with me. And it would give me confidence to do very scary things. One time I had to go to court and it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. I was lied about. I was maligned. My child came to me and told me what the lawyer was going to say about me. And so the lawyer said something and it was all out of context. And I looked.
Okay, back up. Why were you with a lawyer and what did they say? Give us some frame.
I worked at an organization that was committing horrible fraud, and it was against a very vulnerable population. And as I saw the fraud going on and the people were denied funding and they were in such a vulnerable situation, and I was trying to get the funding to them because I had the capacity to do that, but they were lying to the donors about the funding, and they said,
"Oh my God,
we don't have anybody that needs it. We're good. We don't need it." And I said, and they were closing the office. I didn't work full time. I just worked part time, and they were closing the office and telling people, we're not there, and they were getting paid as if the office was open, but the office was closed. So the clients were coming to me and saying, we can't get in. There's nobody there. And I'm like, that's so strange. I'm a journalist. I'm an investigative reporter, and I'm also a feature article writer. And so I cared so much about these people. So I went to the supervisor and I said, well, I don't understand what's going on, why we're not getting the funding. Well, the supervisor had believed everything that my supervisor had said. And was like, wait a minute. So I started documenting all the different things and I found the proof, but they didn't want to do anything about it because they said, this person is very influential. We don't want to do anything. So I went over that person's head and they were like, we are dumbfounded because this community that you are serving statistically has the highest need in the whole state. We do not understand. For years, we have wondered why they are not using the funds that are available. Proof in writing? I said, yes. And they said, okay, we're going to bring somebody in to investigate. So they did. And they brought in a legal team. They did all the investigation and they saw that everything I said was true. Yeah. Well, the other people were so threatened that they sued me. And they said that I was slandering them and that all these things that were false. Now they take me to court. And it was a surprise. I was called in at the last minute. I was out of state. I had to drive all night long. to get there. I drove in the minute I was supposed to be there. I'm changing my clothes in the car. It was like crazy. And I walk in. So it was very stressful. I wasn't prepared. I had no idea what they were going to say. I wasn't given any documentation. They refused to give me anything. And so I don't even know what they're going to say. So I go into the meeting facing all these people that hate me. And the lawyer said, you said, and quoted me about something like, say, I don't even remember what it was now, because this was like, I don't know, 30 years ago. But they said something like, I said, you can't get the funding. Like, let's just say that's what it was. You can't get the funding. And so they said, you're the one who wouldn't give them the funding. I'm just making this example up, but what was it? It made me look absolutely horrible. And then my child that wasn't born yet said to me, this is what the rest of the document says. It says this right before it, and it says this right after it. And so I said, you took that out of context, what the document says. And I quoted exactly what I was told before it. And whoever was the judge said, bring that document to me. And he read the document, and it said exactly what I said. And everybody went, they just went, hail. And all the things, it just kept happening again and again, that I would counter with the truth, and they would try to lie in a very, very manipulative way, exonerated, and they were able to move forward, and the people got the funding, and the donors were thrilled. All their spiritual loved ones cared about them, and their unborn children and their loved ones that had gone on were wishing that they could get help. They were struggling. They were suffering so badly. I was done. That was my mission for them. And then I was finished. And as it got on its feet and everything was going well, and I saw that everything had, accomplished its goal, then I said, okay, now I am finished with that opportunity. And thank you. And they asked me to take over. They asked me to be the person that, because the person who committed the fraud finally resigned. Everything came out about them.
Yeah.
But they were so influential that they didn't get fired. They waited until the people resigned. And so then they offered me that position. But I've accomplished, what I was sent here to, because I didn't even want the job. They came and asked me to come and do this job. And I had young children, and I really didn't want to leave my children. So I agreed to do it on this part-time basis. But I suffered a lot from that. This person still lived in the same area, and they tried to do a lot of damage to me personally, and continue to lie about me and things. But I knew that it wasn't true. And I knew that I had spiritual help through that whole horrible trial. But I've had so many trials like that.
For people who will hear your story and take away some things, what would you like them to know now from where you are today?
Yes. There's so much suffering, especially now. There is so much suffering. There's so much mental illness and so much anxiety about the future, and about, a lot of things that we trusted in have been turned on their heads. We don't know what to expect, because we've gone through a lot as a world. And so I feel the energy of anxiety just increasing and increasing and increasing. And so many times when I interact with people, I'm able to give them a message of hope, because sometimes their loved one tells me what to tell them. I just had this happen this week. I had a dream, and somebody came to me, and two people came to me and said, call our children and tell them this message. And I was like, okay. And I did. And then they said, go back and look at our obituary. So I Googled it. I found their obituary. It was that day, like 7 years prior. And I was like, no wonder they came today, because their children were remembering that day was so important to them. And they were thinking of them, and they were feeling the loss. So what I want people to know is that your loved ones that have passed on, those that have lived and have passed on, your ancestors, and your posterity that has not yet been born, they all love you so much. They want you to succeed. They want to help you. They rally around you. A lot of times people think that they're way up there in heaven, way far away up there. And, they look up and they think they're way up there. They're not way up there. They are right beside you. And so many times when people have like near-death experiences and they see that, they're like, oh my gosh, they're right there. And they go,
Thanks for listening to this episode of Transcending Trauma, the Spiritual Odyssey. If you're working to overcome trauma and would like to work with me or be a guest on my show, contact me through my website at shariroberts.org. Please hit the follow button to make sure you don't miss any episodes. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn at Shari Roberts. You can find all the links in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Shari Roberts, your host, reminding you that you're never alone. Until next time, sending you love and light.